Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. On today's show, coding has gotten obviously a lot smarter with AI, but how do we know which tool is really going to work for our workflow? I mean, we have tools like a rise of tools like Cursor and Replit and Bolt and Z.dev and Lovable and Devin and Data Button and I don't know, 20 more probably that are out there. And they made it really easy for full-time coders and our initial newbies alike to really streamline development and automate routine coding tasks and provide intelligent coding solutions. But look, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. Knowing which tools to use and what limitation exists really are key. So look, today's the Daily AI Show. Today is January 21st. And with me is Andy. We've been holding it down here for a little bit. We do have Beth in the background on tech. So she will be sort of with us and helping us out in the chat. And we're hoping to have a lot more of the crew back by the end of the week, just one of those weeks. So Andy and I are holding down the fort, but this is a good one for us. And everybody's really lucky that we do have you, Andy, here, because I mean, for me, at least, you are the main person I know in my life who has had hours upon hours of experience using these code builders. And what I think is going to be really interesting in this conversation is to understand, what were your coding abilities prior to this? Anything, little, nothing? Did you ever know Python? And we could talk maybe a little bit more about like what the intent was of why you decided to get into these. And then obviously, what are some of the restrictions on that? And you may have this, so if you want to jump off with this, you can. But like before we get to that, I thought it'd be interesting to just like maybe do a little background on what these tools do. And for that, I was just going to use just a few things from that I, in my research, got from Perplexity. Basically, and Andy, add to any of these, for productivity gains, they're reporting up to 45% increase in developer productivity. 30% of code is written with AI assistance now. I'd have to, check that, but that's what it's saying. 20 to 50% faster completion of coding tasks. Then you have the cost optimization, so reduced development time, lower debugging costs, more efficient resource allocation. And then you have, I thought I missed one in there, a quality assurance, so real-time error detection, automated code review, consistency checks, so on and so forth. So that's really what a lot of these tools bring. Now, certain tools like Cursor play a different role than maybe like a Data Button or Lovable for sure, which is a popular one right now, and others where it's maybe more about the minimally viable product than it is like the back end full development and full tech stack type thing where you're really going to deploy this. But anything you would add to that, Andy, and obviously, kind of give us your intro into this part of it, because I think we're really going to be leaning on your expertise today for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, for context, think that it wasn't so many years ago that even in order to put up a simple website, just a brochure website, you pretty much had to hire an engineer to do that for you. And then these platforms came out, which like Wix or Squarespace, allowed you to use a drag and drop kind of editor to create HTML pages and then launch those. That was really kind of the first introduction to a coding assistant, but just for the purpose of this narrow purpose, not of writing deep application code and a full system code, but rather just to put something up on the web. So what's rapidly advanced now with generative AI is that those large language models learn coding languages just like they can learn all the other zillions of languages on the planet. And so now they've become very good at being able to speak code. And depending on what the training set is that's put into one of these platforms, they have a range of skills all the way, including debugging, for example. They can identify a syntax problem in a piece of code, which is a nasty little bug where just, the curly bracket isn't in the right place. And let me back up to one of your first questions, which is, what coding experience do I have? Well, I can go all the way back to my college years in the 70s. And that I went to Dartmouth, and there it was the president of the university at that time was named Kamini, who was the inventor of beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code, BASIC. BASIC was the original programming language for computers on a time-sharing system, and I cut my teeth on that. But from that point forward, I mean, I went into the ski industry and retailing and all this, and I was always involved in technology, but I was never coding. I was never writing code, with the possible exception of writing macros in 1, 2, 3 or
Oh man, yeah.
in a spreadsheet. Okay, so I
Yeah.
knew the ideas about automation, but I didn't really have much experience that way. I later, when I came out to Silicon Valley and was involved with the internet, I was involved in a number of startups of my own device or some others that I joined, where I ended up being a lead in terms of product design development, but not doing the engineering. Always the code was done by engineers who had taken computer science degrees and did that. So I don't know how to code in any language at this point. Zero coding skill. If you put me in front of a notebook and said, here, write a Python script, yeah,
Yeah.
I have to ask an AI to do it. So that's
Yeah.
where I am. So I'm looking at, and I'm experienced now with, many, many hundreds and hundreds of hours with a no coding platform called Replit. And I've also tried Bolt.new briefly, but I focused almost all my efforts on Replit because it is a complete package in the sense that I don't have to figure out, once I've established a working application, I don't have to figure out how to then deploy that to the web, which most of the other packages originally required. And even Bolt.new has a sort of kind of a companion system called Netlify, where you can launch your application once you've built it. And then what's nice about Replit is it has its own database built into it. So when I work on Bolt.new, I use Supabase, which is really easy because the Bolt.new platform tells you exactly what to do to configure your Supabase and connect it to your Bolt.new application platform. So that's easy, but Replit's even beyond that in terms of simplification for a no-coder like me, because it has a Postgres database built into it. So I can develop a schema, which is the design of what columns are in the database, the field values that I want for each of the entries in that database, for a user, for example, or for a course, as I'll show you in the example that we're working on here. So that's already built into Replit. And so in addition to that, you can literally click a button that says deploy, and it'll deploy your application to the web. So it's all right there in a tidy little package. So let me now move on to some of the problems with what the state of no coding assistants are at the moment. And I'll boil it down to one thing, which is, first of all, you have to kind of understand how to speak to an engineer, because that's what it is. It's acting as an engineer for you, and I don't have to pay an engineer anymore. I can use Replit's a coding assistant to write the code that I request it to write. But I need to be able to provide what are called specifications, right? I need to specify what I want it to do. And that's a unique kind of language that requires some understanding of coding, not coding necessarily, but at least product design and product requirements, let's call it. You can speak to these coding assistants in the terms of product requirements, and that's what I do. And now I'm going to share my screen, and I'll show you Replit's interface, and I'll just lead into it while I'm doing that sharing by saying that the biggest problem with these is the small context that the assistant can maintain as it's doing its work for you. So here, and I'll elaborate on that and give you an example.
Can I get you to pause just a second though? Because I imagine, and I'm learning from you as I'm listening, but I imagine we have quite a few people here who are going to listen to this show and say, I'm like Andy. I maybe I touched Python one time in college or whatever. Maybe I did some C+ back in the day, but I'm not a coder, but I do have some ideas and I'd be curious to see what I can do. So now you mentioned just a few things I think are important to elaborate on. You mentioned Supabase, and you also mentioned the ability to well, I think you said regress. I'm trying to remember what you said, but anyway, you were saying that you like
Postgres. It's a database, yeah.
So what, and just explain in layman's terms what that means, what that enables you to do. You kind of said it like it'll let you get to a website and actually publish it. But is that what we're talking about? Is that it's just a sort of, in terms of Replit, at least, I know there's others that do it, but you feel like it's all in one solution because you're both creating the app or the product and you're also able to deploy that product. Is that what you mean by that?
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
there's literally a deploy button in Replit, whereas you can deploy something from Bolt.new or Lovable, I believe, but you have to do, and I'm not keeping up with all the capabilities as they rapidly iterate. So I
Sure.
don't know. I might not be able to speak authoritatively on Lovable, which is a really preferred one for, I'll call them mini apps. Like if you're just trying to do something simple and quick, Lovable can really do it, but it's also capable of doing more complex applications like the one that I'm going to show you.
And
So yes,
after after yours, like when we get to the back end, after you show your screen and go through that stuff, I do have some stuff that I can share from like doing Perplexity searches about these
yeah,
different tools, and that might be helpful for people as well on pros and cons of the different tools and stuff, because I know I wanted to look that up as well. But yeah, let's get into
okay.
your
So
screen share.
here's my screen, and let me just say that before we even, I'll let you kind of look at it. I'm not seeing it on the screen
Yeah,
here.
there
Oh,
we
there
go.
we
I was
go.
gonna say, hold on a second, we gotta get Beth to share it for us.
Okay. So I'll give you a tour of the screen, but don't try to confuse yourself with it yet. Let me just say that for any application, what you have to have is you have to have a front end, which is what presents the web page for your application out there on the web. You have to have a back end that's driving the logic of the interactions between the front end and the database that's behind there, and also some of the tools that are in the back end that are managing the process, API management particularly. So what I've built here is over the course of months, this is a many months long project, is a platform to develop and deliver a course, a series of lessons that are all generated by AI. So the AI is generating all the content. So that means that I got to have a web UI, and I'll show you that. I have to have in the back end here, you're looking at an admin screen where I have data editors where I can manage all of the components of those lessons and the prompts that are being sent to the OpenAI API. And that back end is also connected then to the database, which holds, like when you register for this course, you'll go through a typical registration process, provide your email, etc. And that will create a row in a user table in the database. And then when you log in again, it'll know which lessons you've done and where you are, and it'll have some memory of who and what you're doing, like which courses you are signed up for and so on. So all of those things have to be sort of laboriously defined as you go through this process. So now I'm going to switch. I think you got a big picture of what all those pieces are. All those pieces are available right inside Replit, so I can show you all of those elements right now. So I'm going to give you a tour of this UI. And I hope you can see my cursor a little bit here. So you see
We
up here
can.
at the top of this admin view, and this is, I'm on the web view tab. So this is showing you what a user, and in this case, it's an admin user who's logged in with special credentials to be accessing this admin panel. And I'm looking at the admin screens here that allow me to actually edit the courses that are presented. So I have to select one of the courses and one of the lessons to edit a lesson, for example. Also here, I have a thing called console. Now, console is showing me what's happening in the back end, and I can scroll through this and see it has a health check that says the development server is running frequently. It's performing some actions that are getting information from user progress table or prompt templates, for example. And it also, I can ask the assistant to create logging to the console so I can see it of certain actions that are being taken that aren't typically shown just in this mode where it's showing what the operation of those two different servers are. I have two servers here, a client server and a development server. Okay, there's also, I mentioned there's this database, and the database is Oh, wow. I gave it a name called Blue Poetry 7388. Okay. So, uh, anyway, I can go in and look at the overview of this database and see the database contents. These are the various tables that are built into this database. And I built none of these, although I defined the schema for them. And I gave the assistant, which is over here on the left, I gave it examples in a CSV file, a spreadsheet of what the columns were of the database that I wanted. And then it went forward and built all of these tables in this Postgres database that is the backend data that's being used to generate this whole thing. Okay, there's also a tab up here called Progress, which is reporting to me as the developer. It's reporting to me where we are in the process of its service to me on the left as it's building something. I'm gonna pause for a moment and now go over here. First, let me pause and see if there are any questions that you have quickly, or if there are any questions coming up in the chat that I need to answer quickly before going on, because I'm going to continue. This is going to take many minutes to show you what's going on here, but I think it'll give you an idea of how you too could use such a platform to build something. And you won't, as your first effort, try to build something as complicated as Sensei is, but you can build something very simply by using these same tools that I'm showing you here.
Yeah, I think you're explaining it great. And Beth just brought it up on screen because she was just showing. Jude was saying this is so much faster and cheaper than hiring a dev team. But is it really as good at the end of the day? And I will just give my opinion on that, Jude, just based on everything I've learned and listening to people like Corbin Brown. You can follow him on YouTube. He does phenomenal YouTube videos. That he's a developer. He understands coding, and so he has that background knowledge when he's looking at these tools. He's done many videos on, I would say, pretty much every platform. And what you really hear from him is what is the intended use case? Are you trying to move toward, like what Andy's building right now is to be deployable, to be usable? But a lot of people just want to do something like a minimally viable product, and they want to test something out. They want to put it in front of a couple of test users to see if it's got any air underneath its wings, right? And test it that way. But I'm going to go off of what Corbin's saying, since he has the expertise. His opinion would be, unless you're going into like a cursor, unless you kind of know what you're doing, unless you have sort of a full stack understanding of it, you probably don't want to build big solutions, maybe big coding solutions in here. And I'll leave that variable in there. But I think that's the way I look at these, is that right now they're already very good. We know that the experts are using these tools, maybe different tools like a cursor or something, or z.dev, because they kind of already understand the language and they're using AI to help them, not necessarily like rewrite everything on their behalf. But then there's obviously a lot of tools. Replit's one of them. Others that I mentioned at the top of the show, where it really is about, you have an idea, but you don't know how to code, but you can really deploy something like Andy's showing us here to get value out of it. So, the follow-up question that I think Justin had after Jude, Andy, was, is this just going to lead to a lot of so-so apps because everybody can now quote unquote code? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? And we can maybe just hold that question towards the end till after you're done showing your screen stuff, but something to definitely, talk about by the time we wrap up today. But maybe
well, the success ultimately of the app has lots to do with usability and user interface rather than the actual functioning of the app. So, I've spent most of the couple of months that it's taken me to build to this point just to get all the pieces and parts working together. And I have not yet finalized the user experience, but I'll show you what the current sort of minimum viable user experience is in a minute. But I wanted to say first that, this is not faster than hiring an engineer. It's slower.
Mm-hmm.
It's cheaper. I can show you, for example, here, this is a gauge of what my cost was yesterday, just using this assistant. This assistant that I'm showing you here cost me $5.40 yesterday. That's not even close to what it would cost for a full day work with an engineer, right?
Sure.
So it's way, way cheaper, but it's also very slow and very, very irritating because, as I mentioned at the top, these assistants cannot maintain the full context of a complex app like this. They can only look at, like it'll look, see, notice right here on the left side, I read 7 files. Well, the number of files in this application are shown over here on the left, right? Every one of these folders you open up and they have individual files in there. It's only reading 7 of hundreds of files in here. It doesn't really see the big picture ever. I gave it the big picture originally in a product requirements document, and that allowed it to build something very basic out of its understanding of what I was trying to achieve. And that's the beauty of what you as an individual user out there can do. You can give it a text prompt of saying, here's the things that I want this app to do, and it's going to build something to do that. But once you have to dig in and you want to build and make changes to the user interface or to the user experience flow or to the mode of operation, like, for example, I'm just using the chat completion API here to just deliver a big chunk back of the lesson. And I really will eventually want it to do streaming and also do voice. And when I start to make changes in there, this is where things can really go awry. Because when you ask this agent or this assistant, and by the way, here, just notice that I have 2 different ways that I can work. I can work with the agent over here, which is the Replit agent. And this is where you would start. You would just click on agent up here and you would start telling the agent what you want it to build. Or I can use a coding assistant. And this coding assistant, if you look down here, see down here, it's Claude 3.5 Sonnet V2. And it says, hey, note that Claude 3.5 Sonnet V2 is best for code generation, and you will experience degraded performance with other models. So I've shifted from originally using the agent to using the assistant, because now what I'm doing is I'm not using the multi-agent system that Replit has provided. It has multiple agents, one that's skilled in the database, one that's skilled in the front end, one that's skilled, and they work coherently and together, but they are not just one chat with full context of what the long history of that one day's effort is. They tend to require that I go to a new chat frequently because it exhausts their ability to maintain context.
Right.
Because they have a limited context window in there. Okay, so not cheap. I'm sorry, not fast, but cheap. But it's expensive in your personal time.
Sure.
And your personal patience, because you really have to be persistent to work your way through all these problems. And you guys know from me whining about it that I was diverted for about a month and a half when I asked the agent, not the assistant, I asked the agent to just remove some duplicate logging in the console that was annoying me. It was just taking compute cycles that I didn't need. And what it did in doing that was it looked at lots of other stuff and made changes all over the place that completely crashed the app. And I couldn't even get the servers to start anymore. And it took me literally a month to get it back to the point where you could even see these screens again. But that code was still back there. And so eventually it emerged. All right, so let me now kind of bump ahead here and we'll do a demonstration. I'm going to shift to, this is the web UI for this, not deployed Replit, but this is just a view of what it looks like. And so I'm going to show you what this course, Prompting AI Assistance, looks like. So I have here the chapters and lessons. There's 5 chapters, and under each chapter there are lessons. So I can click on any one of these things and I can look at the lessons that are underneath it. And if I select one of these lessons, it'll generate that lesson. So let's go to system prompts and user prompts. So I select that lesson. And right now it's slow. It takes about 6 or 7 seconds to generate the result. And eventually I'll get to the point where it's streaming stuff in almost immediately. And now it's generated the lesson, and you can scroll through this lesson and read it. And by the way, the design of this application is there's about 50 lessons. Each one of them should take you about 3 minutes. It doesn't take very long. And you walk through it, and then objective is for you to then sort of ask questions and get into a dialogue with the assistant. And that's the rich part of the experience. But I don't have much guidance here about that. I'm really only at the stage where it'll generate the lesson. So anyway, that's kind of the way that you navigate this thing. You have a little breadcrumb up here. You're in the first chapter. You're in the first topic, guiding conversations with LLMs. And this is just explaining what system prompts are as distinct from user prompts. I can open navigation again and go to another lesson. And I can also go down here and talk to the tutor at any time that I want. So that's the way that works. I can go into the admin screen just to show you what it looks like to edit one of these things. Let's go to the same Prompting with AI Assistance course. I'll select the chapter. Let me do that over here. Okay, so there's a bug, right? I can't select the chapter to do that. So somewhere in the process, while I've been working on this other part of the app, trying to get the speed of the generation right and reduce redundant fetches, I have lost the functionality of this. So I'm going to have to go back to that and fix that, because it's made some mistake there that has affected the ability to select the chapter in the editing by the admin.
And I think that's a good call out here, Andy, is that, okay, a couple things I want to point out really quick before you move on. There's been some chat back and forth in our chat, which, by the way, let me say this before we even get to that. If you want to join us, we're here live. Even if you're watching us at 10 p.m. at night, we do these shows live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m., which means that should you be available at 10 a.m. Eastern, you're always welcome to come over to YouTube and join the actual live chat. We have people doing that right now, like Jen and Jude and CJ and Justin and others. We always appreciate that. I'm reading through the chat right now. But there's a little bit of dialogue, Andy, about is this worth it, right? Am I going to just run into more problems? Shouldn't I just started with people who are already experts in this field and so on and so forth? There was comments, CJ made a comment like, yeah, but nobody has months to work on this. I think it's worthwhile to point out that this was a choice by you. You're the type of person, if I can, Andy, that you're going to learn by doing. You personally have the time to do this. And this is a choice. Nobody's forcing you to work on this 8 hours or whatever you decide to put into it on a daily basis, that you enjoy the challenge of this. It's been, God knows, on the back end, we've heard about the frustrations that you run through. This is also early on with these code helpers, these AI helpers, and there's going to be a lot of quirks along the way. You just kind of pointed out one. It's a bit of a whack-a-mole where you fix one problem and another one pops up that previously wasn't a problem, and now you're going backwards and forwards. So I just want to point out that this is a choice that in this particular case, also you picked, I would consider to be a fairly complex problem. This is not the same thing as building a quick MVP or something that you just have an idea and you want to deploy it tomorrow. We have numerous, you can Google them, you can ChatGPT them, you can Perplexity them. If you want to get examples of what people have built in 3 days, 2 days, 5 hours using things like Lovable or Data Button or Zed or Cursor or other ones, those exist. This is just your particular use case of what you decided to do and kind of the complexities of that using Replit. So yeah. I just don't want anybody to get it twisted.
Right. Let me just say that the forcing function for me to have invested all of this time is I'm not willing yet to go through the exercise, which is also quite difficult, of managing an engineering team or even a single engineer to build this application for me. I'm not ready for that. It takes as much time as dealing with this engineering assistant. You have to, have somebody who's going to do that. And they're charging at anywhere between, like if you use an offshore person, $50 an hour for a reasonable guy to $200 an hour. And you put 1,000 hours into that to finalize and deploy an app. And you're talking about a big chunk of money. I don't have that to do that. Yeah. So that's why I'm building an application that I have in mind that I think has extensible application across a number of domains. And I'm going to invest my time in it rather than spending my money while I go off and play or go skiing or whatever, while the engineer does it.
And it's fair
Let
to
me,
say too, like this isn't lost time. What I see when you're working through this is you're gaining a ton of knowledge in what we always profess, which is if you want to get better at prompting, go prompt, go play. You're essentially playing. You have an end goal in mind, of course, and you want to see this through, but you're in one of these. You pick one, pick Lovable, pick any one of them, and go play. Go
and
see
learn
what
how
you
it
can go
works. Yeah.
create. Because I would imagine, all things considered, if you and I both started, on a different project tomorrow in Replit, you would be far past me because you've had all this experience on how to say things to this, well, the agent or the assistant, on how to get your point across. And this is so important for prompt engineering. Every program is going to be a little different. You're dealing with Claude. Claude's a little different than ChatGPT and so on and so forth. So you're building a knowledge base here on how to be more efficient using this. And I would imagine you're much
Yeah.
more efficient in how you ask for things
That's a
today.
good point. I am developing I'm
A skill
developing
set.
some experience and expertise with Replit specifically. But
Yeah.
the other platforms like Bolt New and Lovable would be the other two that I would go play with. They're probably very similar in many respects. I know that, from looking at YouTubes of other developers, not no code people like me, but people who are using Lovable, that they found that they ran into problems with Replit, like I've described, and I want to show one final example before I stop sharing. But they then went to Lovable, and Lovable was able to achieve the result more swiftly and in a course of days rather than in months. So I'm interested in jumping over to Lovable and experiencing that as well. But I've invested so much time and effort in this application platform in Replit that I'm going to finish the job.
Can I ask a
Now
quick follow up to that before you move on? Just a
yeah,
real quick,
go
because
ahead.
you just said it. Is it even possible for you to take everything that's been built? So obviously all the files, right? Can that be exported and imported into a different tool? Is that even possible?
That's not the way it works, but
Okay.
I could take the main Python file here and the various other files that you see there on the left and give them to the new platform as context. Like say, review this code and you'll see what another agent built, but it's going to unfortunately be a little bit confusing because, for example, this Replit uses the React and Vite server React as the front end, and it may be that Lovable uses Flask or something else, and so it'll have to translate. And
Gotcha.
so I'm not sure that I want to do that. I'd rather use what the designers of that platform did, which is, hey, we just want a text prompt, and then we're going to build on our platform. We know what we think you want to have built. So I'm going to try it that way first.
Yeah.
But we'll give it a product requirements document that shows what all the features and functions are of both the admin views and the user views of this application. So now
Nice.
let me just show you an example of just how confounding the interactions with these assistants can be. So what was happening yesterday as I was doing this was there was a problem with it being very slow. It's taking like 30 seconds to do the thing. And I asked it repeatedly to figure out what was going on. And it turned out that one of the things that was happening was it was doing multiple fetch requests for the same lesson content. And what that meant was it's going to the database, it's getting the context, it's sending it to the API, but doing it repeatedly. So it was like doing a race, like a redundant repetition of those things. And that was causing OpenAI to send back multiple copies of the same course. But I couldn't see that because there was code in this side that was saying, okay, just restrict it to one, just only show one. But it was taking 20 seconds to get to the one because it was having to go through all those others. So at one point, I thought we had, the assistant had said that it had fixed that, and I was noticing it was improved, but it was down to like 12 seconds. I said, have we effectively prevented multiple fetch requests for the same lesson content? And then it says, no, I can see that the redundant fetch problem is still occurring here. And I said, okay, so let me fix this. And this is this is the dialogue that happens. Okay, I'm going to fix this, and here's how I'm going to fix it, and here's what's going to happen. And then I had to say, you need to undo those changes because now it doesn't even let me sign in.
Yeah.
So something it did just blew that apart. So we reverted that. And then I said, let's remove, it said, okay, looking at the logs, there are two main issues. The API server has an error with OpenAI single parameter, and the client is trying to connect to localhost 5000 instead of the correct API endpoint. Well, I want to highlight this because this then resulted in the assistant changing the port configuration for the communication between the development server and the client server. And I'm going to scroll down here and say that it then busted everything. And then I asked, why are port configurations ever changed once they're working? And it said, you're absolutely right. Port configuration should remain stable once working. And the working port configuration you're set up is API server 5000. But then later on, I notice it says the development server is now starting on port 3000. Is this the port that the client dev server is now pointed to? And it said, no, I detected a problem. It's supposed to be looking at 5000, but it says it should be running on 5000. Let me fix that for you. And then I said, now for my edification, please explain why you changed the port for the development server from 5000 to 3000, creating a mismatch and necessitating this restoration to port 5000. It said, I did not change the port.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
What? Okay. With that, I'll just say that's the kind of stuff you've got to deal with.
Yes.
When you're working with this thing.
So look, I think I love that you shared all that because number one, it's not a magic wand. I think it's important to talk about that. Like, is this a magic wand? Can I come up with any idea I want? And if I read some of the websites or the landing pages, I might get the impression that poof, it exists, and I no longer need to know how to edit or code rather. And I think that's why it's interesting to me, some of these other platforms, Data specifically. You know what they do, Andy? They, I'm sure it's a higher price than where maybe Replit is, maybe not, but they make developers or coders available to you in a chat. So it's like what you're doing, but you have real-time help whenever you need it. That, I'm not saying everybody should go there or whatever. I've never used the tool, but I found that interesting because that seems to be a good marrying right now of where we are. You have people have said it in our chat too. You have coders who have a leg up because they can always at any point go into the coding and read it, and they can make it changes themselves. They may be able to go into the back of the Replit and go, I can see where the problem is here, and I'm gonna push the agent in that direction. Or perhaps they're gonna fix it themselves because they can write in that coding language where you can't, right? But I do like this idea of like this in between where, hey, go at it on your own, but we have live coders who are there to help you jump in when there's issues. And of course, you're going to probably pay for that. You're going to pay for a little bit more. But if you're trying to find that sweet spot between your own time invested and your own money invested, you might in fact, find that to be a better solution, especially if you're trying to move fast. Somebody was just saying, what was I talking about? This is called Data is the name of this tool. If people are asking about it. Now, a developer's on call. Yeah, Data is the name of it. I'm not vouching for it. I don't know more than that other than I was doing research. I heard other people talk about it. And I thought, oh, that's interesting because while there is support in chat, they seem to have a more focused attention on making sure that there's always coders available, developers, whatever title you want to give them, available to you as you're moving through the program. But their price points might be a little different. In fact, from my research on Perplexity, just to give you guys an overview, you have like trial credits with Data, but it can be anywhere from 50 to 500 a month. I'm sure 500 is a lot of credits. 50 is wherever that is. And then you have your other tools on there which we're going to get into in a second. But anyway, just want to answer that question. Again, go check it out.
Let me just mention because we talked about Cursor. Cursor is really a leading coding agent out there, but it's a local process. Like I have Cursor on my machine, and I could spend time transferring documentation from my Replit over to Cursor on my desktop and asking Cursor to fix something and then giving it back to the assistant and say, here's the code that I want to deploy. And we've seen this kind of thing where you ask a coding assistant, whether it's GitHub Copilot or whatever else, to actually generate the code for you, and then you plant that code into the application or web service that you want. Like creating a Chrome extension, for example, can be done that way. The idea of Cursor is that this is a coding assistant literally on your desktop, and so it's not really useful to someone who wants to just build a small app, start to finish. There you want to look at Lovable, Replit, Bolt, and I said them in that order because Lovable's the easiest, I believe. Replit's pretty easy, and it's a complete package where you can deploy it and share it to the web, right? And then say, here, friends. And by the way, I just want to say, when I finish this application, and it's a prompting course, it's a prompting course of about 50 lessons, 3 minutes each, and you can go through it and you'll be much more knowledgeable about prompting and working with AI than you were before if you haven't done such a course. It'll be on our website. You'll be able to use this course for free, and you can create an account and do that. And I hope you'll provide some feedback to me on the usability and the quality of the experience that is delivered by that application when it's finally ready. It'll be a couple of months from now when I finally am done with that.
Yeah. No, you mentioned some of the tools. By the way, that's cool. Awesome. I didn't to put it on the website. I'm really looking forward to that. And I've obviously, you and I have worked on where I can jump in and help on other parts of the project and stuff like that, which has been super fun and figuring out all what goes into it. But it's a great idea on how to deploy and lean on LLMs to deploy learning modules and do it in a way that's at the pace and at the style that the actual end user needs for learning, so that it's not forcing anybody to learn prompting in a certain way. It's allowing you to explore. It's allowing you to come up with other ways of looking at it and looking at the module and learn along the way, which I'm really excited about. Okay, I did mention that I would talk about this, so I want to bring up a little bit about other tools here. We've talked a lot about Replit, obviously, because that's what, Andy, you've been working in primarily. This is how, when I sort of filtered through and I was using Perplexity to do some research, this is sort of a short and sweet. Cursor, professional developers, kind of to the point like you were just talking about, Andy. It's local. You find a lot of actual developers using it. Replit, students and hobbyists. Devin, enterprise development teams. Devin is very expensive, but there's a reason why it is the way it is. Lovable, web developers. Zed, that's speed-focused developers. Mainly, it's been developers and people who have coding experience that I've known use Zed.dev. Bolt for rapid prototyping. Data Button, non-technical founders and business users. And then just for what, I decided to ask, hey, given everything that me and Perplexity had worked on doing the research for this show, which one do you recommend? And the answer that came up was best choice was Lovable. Now, it said the reasons were key advantages: 20 times faster than traditional coding, intuitive natural language interface for describing ideas, live rendering with instant feedback, one-click deployment capability, built-in Supabase integration for backend functionality, pricing starting at just $20 a month for 100 credits. I don't know how far those credits go. It says launch is $50 a month, and it does have in parentheses more suitable for MVPs. Then it gives, and it's scaled $200 a month. It says the runner-up. This is, again, just what I came out of Perplexity doing some research using Perplexity Pro to be specific. It said the runner-up was Data Button, designed specifically for non-technical founders, full stack development capability, strong support system with expert guidance, natural language prompts for app creation, React front end and Python back end included, with a very similar, almost exactly different, similar pricing model to Lovable. And it says, why not others? And it says Replit, steeper learning curve. So you could speak to that, Andy, whether you think that's true or not. More developer focused, recent price increase makes it less attractive for buyers. I'd have to check that fact to see if that's true or not. Bolt, better for prototyping, requires more technical knowledge, limited to web applications. And then it says Cursor Devin, too expensive for beginners, requires coding knowledge, better suited for professional developers. So just to put that out there. And I said, okay, well, give me some examples of things that have been done. And it talks about a different couple companies. Now, these are coming from Lovable, so take this as you will. But it talked about a company named Print Pigeon, which was a document printing and mailing service that was built in just 3 days on Lovable. It talks about another one called Habit Tracker, which was built in 5 hours. Country economic dashboard built in 5 minutes. So again, it depends on what is it that you're trying to do. Are you trying to build something that's going to stand the test of time that any coder could dig into and say, yeah, that's how I would have done it too? That might be one tool. If you've got time and you're willing to work through the process, and Jen was saying in the comments, but I learned through doing, then I think, Andy, you have a really good solution on how you've done that. And maybe Lovable would be similar. I don't know. Or do you just need some rapid prototyping? And then there might be a separate tool for that keeps costs down, that just allows you to see really quickly whether, quote, this is a thing. Does this have any legs to it? Can I actually do the thing that's in my mind? Can I visualize it? Do I just need something really quick to show a client? Because I can imagine 100 use cases in sales where you might want to rapidly develop something in under a day that would be really helpful to you to, like, maybe closing a deal in sales. There could be all sorts of use cases why you might want to rapidly develop something in a day so that you can show it to somebody else. I mean, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if you have something that's a movable app that they can poke around in a conference room, that could secure any number of size deals and be really valuable to you. So just wanted to bring up some of what I found in the research, because I promised that we would do that. If you're starting from scratch, obviously you saw what Andy has been doing in Replit. But really, I think the answer is, Andy, right? Just pick one and go play. Use the free credits, use a free tier, use whatever they give you as far as, your options. It looks like Cursor has a 2-week trial. Lovable has 5 prompts a day you can use. Zed has a free launch. Bolt has limited free. DataButton has trial credits. Replit has a starter plan. There's very low barrier of entry if you want to go learn this stuff. And there's a lot of value to it, because this is really going to be the future of coding. And as we always say, and Matt Wolf says, this is the worst it'll ever be. So all the stuff you're dealing with Replit today, we can imagine in a year, Andy, that it would be a smarter system. You would no longer have to go back. It wouldn't change ports on you. You would have more user control and functionality and ability to sort of lock things in where you need to and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll just say that each one of these players is trying to ensure that they survive in this really competitive landscape of, I'll say, app development, no code app development services. And they're making, you can imagine, they're working around the clock to try to get larger context for their agents, reduce errors, and the training that's going into the AI that's supporting all of that is continuous. They're not just resting on their laurels that they happen to develop something that would allow you to do a minimum viable product swiftly. It's going to get more and more sophisticated, and so it's a win-win for you, because you can either play the waiting game and there's a waiting value if you just wait another 6 months and start with something that's the next version that came out, like Replit. And Replit was followed by Bolt.new and then by Lovable, each one of them having new and interesting capabilities. There'll be something else that comes down the road. And by the way, I wanted to mention that at the really high end of coding agents, there are some startups that have gotten really high valuations on their initial rounds. One of them is called Poolside. And Poolside is really designed for the future of coding, which is, this is a super intelligent engineer that can do it all. That's their objective, and that's simplifying what the Poolside objective is. But that's been backed by some really major players at a very high valuation. And so it's going way beyond what these simple tools are that we're looking at right now.
Yeah. No, I love it. So look, we'll obviously come back and talk about these coding agents as they have more iterations, as they get better, as new news comes out. You never know when a 2.0 or a 3.0, some of them are going to come out. And yeah, there's a lot of them right now. So, which one is going to sort of stand the test of time? Which ones are going to, maybe fall off because they don't have a big enough moat? Time will tell. But that's sort of the beauty of this show, is that we'll tell you what we know today. We'll tell you what our opinions are today, how we see it, how we see it shaping up. And then as things change, we'll be back because we're here 5 days a week to talk about it more and keep you updated. And, you know, look, I saw a lot of comments just as you were finishing up there, Andy. Lots of people just giving a lot of, praise to the show. Some asking when Beth will be back, which totally understand. We want our whole crew here. So we'll have some more people back.
Next week, Beth will be back.
On Monday, Beth will be back. Carl should be back on Friday. Jimmy should be back soon. And of course, Aaron's been popping in where he can, but he is in Perth, Australia. So he's doing the best he can because it's always late at night when he does. So Andy and I will definitely be here holding it down the rest of the week, and we'll get the rest of the crew back in here as we go. Just want to say thanks to everybody in the chat for the great discussion there. Thanks to Beth for running chat and tech on the back end here while she's away. And there were some questions from Gwen about like, could we get some summaries of the tools we talked to today? Hey, thank you, Gwen, for bringing it up, because that's a great reason to go sign up for the newsletter. There's always more than we can always cover. And I think we're always feeling like we could talk another hour, but our intent was always to keep these shows, short to the point, and then provide other resources to you guys so you can do that. So the newsletter is free. Sign up for it if you'd like. You can go to thedailyAIshow.com and do that. It goes out every Sunday. Right now, there's no plans to do it any different than that. It's just a once a week. Hey, here's a lot of what's going on for what we talked about on the show, but not just the show. We go beyond the show into other topics as well. So if you like to wake up on a Sunday morning and you're just looking for like a good long read at like 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern, then the newsletter is perfect for you because it's got a ton of content in it. It's not a short newsletter. It's usually pretty long. In fact, I'm usually having it tell me that Google's going to cut me off if I go any longer with the email. So there you go. All right, that's it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Tomorrow, we're back with the news. There's been tons of news. We have the new election and inauguration and things that were announced yesterday as part of that. That'll come up in the news as well and how that may affect AI. So if you want to learn about all of that, get caught up really quick on the last 7 days of news, come back and hang out with us tomorrow on Wednesday. Thursday, we're going to be talking about the World Economic Forum and some recent reports that came out on job growth, how AI is impacting that. And then Friday, we're going to do our 2-week recap show where we look back at all the episodes, including this one and others over the last 2 weeks. And we just sort of have a nice conversation about different topics that came up, things that have changed, things we've learned thereafter. It's always a great time to do that. So that's it. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. We will see you back tomorrow for all the latest AI news. Until then, thank you, Andy, for all your work today.